Hi, my name is Walker Daniel, and today I'll be sort of discussing Mind Map 2. So first, let's kind of talk about the four readings that were in the second mind map, and the first one was cargo cults. So the arguments that I got from that were that we currently do not live in a scientific world, um, which he kind of described as we don't really fact check or do research. And by we, I assume they're talking about the average person because I feel like um, not everybody does it, but like a lot of people in this school, I mean, it's a technology school, make sure to do fact checking research, which is kind of makes sense. It's all STEM, it's all science related. So it's kind of what I understood from that. And then, the second point that I think I got from that is that we kind of need to live by the scientific method, um, which kind of which he describes later as we when conducting research or doing any sort of research, it's really important to talk about everything, even like what you did wrong, what didn't go as planned, and this was sort of to reduce bias or like have the intention of reducing bias. And then also he used cargo cults as an example, seeing as they didn't really revise their experiment once they realized like nothing was going on. They just sort of kept trying over and over again. Um, which I guess now I'll talk about how I felt about the article. I was iffy on this one. I liked that it emphasized research and fact checking, and especially how that can relate to AI, seeing as you could kind of just like look something up on AI and it will spit out an answer, and then you're kind of like, oh, cool. But no one really fact checks. And it also stresses like integrity when doing research, making sure you've left no stone unturned and you're not like hiding research. So everything's a little more truthful. But and it kind of reminded me of what we were doing last time, last mind map about if AI should be agreeable or not. Um, but yeah, I didn't really like how the argument was phrased. It felt kind of like limiting, almost like this is the only way to do it. There's no other way. And I was like, I don't know about that. Not to say that any of his points were wrong. It's just that I feel like it was, I don't know, like I said earlier, and like limiting. And if you try to do anything else, you'd be invalid. And it kind of had me thinking about, indigenous sciences. And although they're not they're informal in his standards, I feel like they're still valid in their own right. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of how he phrased everything. Now let's go into the second reading, which was Savage Minds. Um, the arguments that I kind of picked from this is God, I can't pronounce this one. Bricolage, um, is a way of thinking that involves taking what you know and recombining it to make something new, and kind of like a form of I think you could call it like mythical thinking, which is like recycling words and themes to create like a new message or meanings behind them. So like what we do with myths. Um, and both bricolage and scientific methods are both valid in their own right, depending on how you kind of want to frame that. And that's kind of the big thing I took away is like how do you frame an argument, um, and sort of what should you do with this new framework. And the last thing is like that I kind of got, or like the quote that I really liked was myth creates structure from event while science creates events from structure. I thought that was kind of a neat way of putting it because I never really thought of myths being so like, I don't know, scientific in a way. So kind of my thoughts is I like this one a lot more. I felt like it was a little more free, a little more valid. It was pretty hard though because this guy, um, I think it was Levy, um, kind of wrote in a weird way, and he used a lot of weird terms like fucking bricolage, excuse my language, and he'd often go back on himself a lot. So I don't know. That was kind of hard to read, but the themes were good. I felt like almost a counter argument to from Cargo Cults because it was like, no, I mean, there's no one way of doing things. So that's what I really liked about that one. The third article was Oh God, it's a big title. The relationships between nature and technology as a philosophical problem. I kind of dubbed this one Bloomberg One, and that's kind of how I'll be referring to it from the rest of the um both in my mind map and the rest of the talking, I guess. But sort of the arguments that I got that from that were that the theory has more being than the technology it creates. Um, which sure, the process of creating technology is more important than the technology itself. That makes sense to me. Kind of goes back on what uh Savage Minds was talking about. Then modern technology skips the theory and goes straight to technology to kind of fill in gaps rather than create new ideas. This was written, I think it was World War II or right after World War II. So I guess that adds context to it. I feel like it's still somewhat the same, but that's kind of a hard thing to I don't know, see, seeing as there's so much technological growth currently. And then the last sort of thing I saw or argument that I got from it is that we need the tech because we do not have claws or shells like an animal would. So like technology is sort of our way to survive in this world. And I like this reading a lot. Again, it was hard, kind of just the way Bloomberg writes is difficult to read. Um, but I really like the way it talked about how technology, we surround ourselves with technology, even to like every waking moment we're surrounded with technology. The clothes we wear, the how like our house is technology. I never really thought of it like that, but yeah. And I'm a bio major, so I really like um him talking about how we filled our environmental niche and with technology. I thought that was pretty cool, and it's kind of like adaptive. So I was a big fan of this one. But I do wish he kind of talked a little bit more about oh God, what was it? How we kind of skip technology or like skip the theory and go straight to technology. I felt it was a big point, but maybe I kind of misunderstood some of the reading. It's Bloomberg, so I don't know. It was hard for me. And then the last one was another Bloomberg article, uh, phenomenolo- phenomenological aspects of life, world, and technization, which I'm going to call Bloomberg 2 for the rest of this. His argument was life experiences are needed for something to be intelligent, which sure, I get that. I think we were talking about that in Mind Map 1 as well. But then he said that everything, even if we try to stray away from that, it always loops back. So we always need um, something, or we always need to have experience for it to be intelligent, I guess. And then technology extends our capabilities, but we get distance from nature, which he was talking about in Bloomberg One as well. And we are continuing to stray away from nature the more we kind of develop tech and modernize, was a big word he used. I like this article as well, but it was hard, and I don't think I really understood it to its full potential. I did like how he was talking about us getting further and further from nature, but then that kind of left me confused because from what I gathered at the first point, um, we are we can't fully stray away from it. So maybe he was talking about um, second nature and how we are straying away from our first nature. Second nature from like Mind Map 1, where we're talking about the way we create technology is creating a second nature. So maybe he's talking about we're straying away from our first nature and going into second nature, is what I've gathered. But um, that's kind of the end of how I saw these first four articles. And let's talk about the connections I gathered. So I got three main ideas, which are how tech is created, or like, and then the process, and then what are tools. And I process this, you'll see it in my mind map, kind of like a chronological thing or like a research paper, and that they all work together, um, to make. So I'll go from the top. How is tech created? I saw this as the hypothesis. Cargo cults talk about how the full research process is important and very structured, which is kind of like a counterclaim to the other articles that emphasize on fluidity and how uh, technology is not as important as the theory. It's sort of like a give and take where you want the research that creates the technology to um, you know, give you more insight and everything. And that insight is what's valuable because it can be used for other things, kind of like how Savage Minds was talking about realized thinking. It can be used to recreate new things. And then the second thing was the process, and which I kind of deemed as the methods. And I split this up into two categories: validity and how it is framed. So first, validity of the process. They all seemingly agreed on, which is that it is valid as long as the intentions are clear. But the intentions are kind of what where things differ, and which I'll talk about in a minute on framework. Um, it's like when you're doing your research, what is more important? And of course, cargo cults and some of B1 and Savage Mind. Sorry, B1 is Bloomberg. I forgot his name. Uh, are they kind of emphasize that the research itself is important, but also Savage Minds and Bloomberg One and the rest of Bloomberg Two all argue that again creation is important as well. So there's kind of a balance there, and then this is all kind of dependent on framework, which is it kind of changes depending on your goals. So again, like we talked about with how they kind of what their intentions are is all uh, interlinked with how it's framed. And then finally, the tools, which I kind of deemed as the results, because tools are created from the process. So um, I found that they kind of define tools. Firstly, each explain the significance of the creation of the tools. So Bloomberg One states that theory is more important. Kirkegaard and Bloomberg Two both agree that they're important, but theory is or sorry, the creation is important, but theory is more important. And finally, Savage Mind sort of says that um, theory is just as important as the tool it creates. So this all combined, you can kind of tell that they really emphasize the significance of theory, and the tools itself are important. Um, but again, it's kind of how we use them, if that makes sense. And like a kind of final thought is that they all emphasize the purpose of these tools um, are used to better humanity and create more technology. And I think that's all I really have to say. I do go into I call it discussions and how it relates to AI, but I feel like it's kind of a dense thing that I don't really have time to speak about. But yeah, this is kind of how I saw all the articles and how I kind of processed them. Thank you.